All right. Welcome, everybody. Welcome, all you viewers and beautiful people out there, to Tavern Talk. I'm GM Chavez. And of course, Tavern Talk is the companion series to our Pristine Dreams, which is an ongoing online TTRPG adventure series that we host on D20 Dreamland. You can find us over on YouTube or wherever podcasts are available. So make sure to check us out on there. And if you have not seen the session one, the first 4 parts of Pristine Dreams, Tavern Talk does recap those 4 parts and our session one, and gives a little bit of behind the scenes detail about what happened from the GM perspective, what happened from the party perspective, and fills people in on a little bit of what goes on behind the scenes of creating Pristine Dreams. So as I said, I am GM Chavez. I am your DM, Dungeon Master, Game Master, Realm Master, Master of Dreams, out here putting together the adventure for my beautiful and wonderful party that I have here today. And without any further ado, we're going to go ahead and introduce our amazing party, starting off with Cypher. Why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself and your character?
Hi, everybody. My name is Cypher, she, her, and my character in Pristine Dreams is Nyx. I, Cypher, have been playing tabletop for almost 10 years, and my favorite class to play is Rogue. So naturally, Nyx is a rogue. She is the reincarnation of my human rogue, Howl. Howl met an untimely end in our last game, and it was actually Renveri who used Reincarnate to bring her back. And that's how we got Nyx, who is an Ifrit. She is brand new, and her memories are fragmented at best. And in most aspects, she's wholly different from Howl, but she does retain the same talents that Howl had. So she's still sneaky, she's still slinky. Her goals have changed, obviously, and in many respects, she's merely weeks old at this point. So we're still watching her story get started.
All right. Thank you, Cypher. And we're going to go ahead and move on and talk a little bit about Renveri.
Hi, I'm Endo. I play Renveri, the cleric of Serenray. I've played D&D, I think, probably about 10 years as well. I got into like TTRPG when 5e was new, so I think that was like 2014. But I've played different systems since then, although D&D is nice and digestible, easy to get back into. I tend to favor spellcasters, although I haven't played cleric too much. It is fun though. Love having everyone's life in my hands. Renveri also likes to look after the people around him and faithfully serve his sun god. He had a very troubled past and did some questionable things he's not proud of. So he's trying to make up for all of that by following the light of the sun as best as he can and look after his friends in this interesting little party.
All right. Thank you, Endo, for that recap. We're going to move right along to talk to Dusk a little bit about their character, Bran.
Howdy, my name is Dusk. I use they, them. I've been playing TTRPG for about 4 years now. I have both experience in Pathfinder 2e as well as Dungeons & Dragons 5e, and a few other minor systems like The Expanse as well as beloved Monster of the Week. It's great to finally have like a game that feels like consistent as well as like a DM who is like works so hard, like giving such a beautiful experience to their players for their game. It's wonderful. And that we get to share this wonderful game with you all.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Dusk. Tell us a little bit about Bran and what inspired that character.
Of course. I play Bran. He uses he, they. He started out as I always loved the idea of like a strong stoic hunter. He's so shaped. He's a man of little words, but has such a big heart for those he cares about. His occupation was like hunting monsters and like tracking down anything that went bump in the night and giving it a soft end. Or more particularly, the sharp end of his sword. And met the party during one of the contracts he took. And he's been hanging around these wonderful dweebs ever since.
All right. Well, thank you, Dusk, for that recap about yourself and Bran. And of course, last but certainly not least is Juno to tell us a little bit about Canopsia.
Hello, my name is Juno. I use he, they pronouns, and Canopsia Wormwood is the champion of Desna. In other words, he's a paladin, to put it more plainly. Canopsia is a silly Billy, but, he can wait a few more minutes because I want to talk about me. It's my turn. I get the talking stick. I've been playing tabletop RPGs for maybe more so seriously within the past 2 years. I have played TTRPGs on and off for a long time, but I haven't ever really had a group or people to play it consistently with. And I have experienced D&D 5th edition, I've experienced Pathfinder 2nd edition, and I've experienced a niche of other systems such as Monster of the Week and Blades in the Dark. I believe that's the name. Whatever. I guess I need to talk about Canopsia, but yeah, I guess I can talk about him. He's all right. He is the follower of the Goddess of Dreams. Not only that, he has little to no memory of who he is and what his mission is. The only thing he has to cling on to is a cloak, a sword, and a feeling that he needs to keep going. But for what? For himself, hopefully, to find pieces of himself. But it's hard to find them when you don't even know where to start. And apparently he's been traveling with these 3 other people who know him, but he doesn't know them the way that they know him. So, in conclusion, he doesn't really know what's going on, but he's trying to figure that out. And all he has to guide him is one cloak with one bear claw on it. Thank you.
All right. Very compelling stuff there. Definitely Canopsia is one of the most interesting characters I've seen in a while, but rounding out a very interesting and awesome party altogether. So with that in mind, I am GM Chavez. I'm running them through the rest of the Pristine Dreams world, the universe that we are creating for our campaign and for our game. And I'm creating that story for them based on those amazing characters. And a little bit about myself. I've been playing tabletop games for about 18 years. Everything from 3rd edition D&D to 5th edition D&D, both versions of Pathfinder, several games in between, Mask of the Red Death, Shadowrun, Rifts, GURPS. I've played a ton of them. But in all that time, I have never played an online D&D game of any kind. So this is my first foray into creating an adventure online. Of course, I create all the visuals and the representations that go into the game. So having kind of a background in graphic design and multimedia is something I lean into when creating this game for them. And for me, this really feels like bridging 2 wonderful things that I love in my life and putting them together to create something extra special and extra awesome. but to be able to share it with a party who has such intricate and complex characters is quite outstanding, because I am a huge fan of the role play aspect of RPGs. So building this world together with all of them has been super exciting. But many of you may not know that it came about in a very kind of bizarre way. And we're going to kick it over to Cypher to kind of tell us a little bit about how Pristine Dreams got started.
Yeah, thanks. So Chavez and I play in person at our friend's place once a week. And knowing I was also in an online game, they'd ask me how it was going. And unfortunately, I just didn't ever seem to have good news for them. Now, I'm not much for negativity. I've never been the type to complain without good reason, So after a couple of months of this, it was pointed out to me that maybe this wasn't the game for me. And I know that happens. So I did tend to agree. And well, actually, it didn't turn out to be the game for any of the players. So yeah, this was one of those situations where all of the players kind of agreed in private that they felt some kind of way about how the GM ran their game. So we started to think that sooner than later, we wouldn't be finishing the adventure, that we'd be walking away from the game and our characters wouldn't get to finish their stories. So I think we chatted about it a lot with Chavez. The four of us really wished we could bring our characters with us to a new game. And well, Chavez decided to take on the project of kind of like porting over our characters to a new game that he would run. We're from different parts of the country, so this is something that we do completely online. What do you think, Chavez? Like, the rest is pretty much history.
Yeah, it was a very interesting task to undertake. I have played in several other games of my own design that kind of would utilize characters in different campaign settings. Oftentimes I'd like to play the same character in two different campaign settings. Oftentimes I'd like to DM a game where I'd ask players to purposely bring a character that they played in a different system and port them over to a system we started playing. So this seemed like something that was a little bit up my wheelhouse, in the fact that I could take what you guys had as characters and help you mold them into something that would fit into a new adventure that I think was more befitting of your guys' play style. Because again, not to knock anyone else who's running a game or playing a game, but everyone has different styles. And some people are very much into the mechanics of games and into the lore of a world, and other people are very character driven and more role play forward and things like that. So all of us tend to enjoy kind of a more role play forward, character driven story, and it just seemed like we would mesh a lot better. But I know Dusk is messaging in the comments there, I noticed earlier, that we can't recount how we got together without kind of restating the catalyst that made the game really happen. And like Cypher said, when they would tell our IRL party kind of stories about what was going on in their other game. One particular one kind of caught our attention, which is a major joke that I planted into Pristine Dreams in part one of the first session. And it's the idea behind no pancakes. So does anyone want to tell the no pancake story of like why that's a thing?
I don't really think it's really much of a story. It's like there is a lot of conflict of personality and like running a game and what to focus on in our old game that just didn't work out. And one of them was just, it was a hard rule. Pancakes did not exist in that world.
Yeah.
And and we talked about it in a world with magic where you can conjure food, literally, like I have a spell called create food, like our GM was like, nope, they just don't exist. And no matter what we said or what we argued, I think Dusk, you even found like an actual like paper about the history of pancakes and leavening in foods and presented to our DM. Yeah.
So like a lot of like a historical thing is like taking like wheat and like a lot of like food that would like spoil and making it into like a sort of like pancake to like make sure it doesn't like go to waste.
Yeah, of course. Like, turning grain into bread would be a way of preserving that food longer. You know.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, I was dedicated to this cause.
You were the champion. Yeah, Canopsia, the champion of Desna. You, Dusk, the champion of pancakes. But yeah, it's just no pancakes whatsoever.
This was definitely something that our IRL group was like, what? We couldn't wrap our head around. When you think of RPGs, a lot of time you think of the rule of cool. You know, if something's kind of cool, it's okay to put it in universe. And that seems so innocuous, like such an irrelevant thing. That would seem somewhat plausible because we know sponge cakes and cakes of different types have been around for centuries. So it's like by the time you're playing in a game in a world that has guns, it seems like having a pancake is like the least of your worries.
It was so silly. I think it stopped the game for like 20 minutes when it came up. And eventually it was just no pancakes. And that's that.
Yeah, so this became kind of the ongoing thing where whenever I would hear stories about the game, it was always referred to, like you called the campaign No Pancake. So when you'd refer to it. So that
name, No Pancakes.
That was a very cool like notion to me, or I shouldn't say a very cool notion, but that was a very apparent notion to me that I was like, I don't think you guys like belong in the game that you're playing. I think you have two different concepts of how the game is played.
Yes.
Yeah. And there's also like, I did spend some time with Cypher, who played in other games with everyone online, like just watching along, just trying to learn a little bit about how online D&D is played, because it's very different than tabletop. There's a lot of similarity, but there are a lot of differences as well. And there's a huge aspect of not being able to read your players as well. Like you really have to lean into what are they actually saying? What are they actually doing? Where you have no body language to refer to, you know, or anything like that. Those hidden things that are there for an IRL DM. But after listening to some games that the rest of you play in, it became incredibly apparent to me that you all love the diner scene, you know, which I'm doing air quotes, but you know, the diner scene that would be like in a movie. And I have listened to several occasions where you all get involved in a very active role play about what you're eating and who's ordering, who's picking up the check. And that kind of role play, while it may seem innocuous to some people who are more into the, I want to cut a monster in half, for really hardcore role players, these are very intimate scenes where you learn a lot about each other and can ask some more deep dive questions.
Yeah, exactly. And like in online playing, since we can't see each other and see each other's expressions or body language and stuff, there's a lot of going into just describing in depth what our character is thinking or why they're doing what they do or how they do it, which is just, it's great fun to paint a word picture together.
It's also one of the reasons why I enjoy like Bran being like a chef so much, is like having a meal together is such a good way to like get to know everyone. Like everyone eats for the most part.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's such a like good picture to just like all settle around like a campfire or something, eating something one of you has made and just chatting. Yeah.
Yeah, like I said, it's a very intimate experience. And like you said, it's something everyone does and everyone can relate to and have a point of reference for. So, you know, when you look at a lot of like character building classes for like literature or something like that, there are some people who will really get into the idea of like, what's your character's favorite food? You know, how do they like to tie their tie? You know, all those details can help make characters feel more real to people. So those little tidbits can be so important. And I think just blanket leaving them out and then ruling something off like out of existence was a little weird to me. So that definitely made me think that you guys needed a little bit of change in terms of how your game was being run. And that's what I hope to bring to you guys with our kickoff adventure here, Pristine Dreams Session 1. And let's go ahead and let's jump into a little bit of a recap of how that actual adventure went, because I know there was a bit of are we really going to do this? Like we were kind of talking about it, and it was like, yeah, I really think I can port these characters over for you guys into a world that I think would make a little bit more sense for your play style. And there was a little bit of a notion to me of like, that's a hefty responsibility to take your characters and fulfill their stories, because I think there's a lot of people out there who can relate to playing a game for a long period of time and then having it fizzle out, whether that be players get busy, people have kids, they priorities change, they move, get a new job, you know, your DM loses interest, sometimes players lose interest, you know, games fall apart all the time. And I like to play games that get to the end, and I have made great effort to do so in the time that I have played, and have successfully ended games on more than one occasion. So to me, that responsibility of having a group come to me and say, we have a group of characters that we're really endeared to, and we want them to have a story that is kind of more worthy of their ending, more befitting of how their story may carry out. And that inspired me in the terms of the name of the session itself, to call it Pristine Dreams, to call our campaign that, meaning that you had dreams for your characters that were still intact. They hadn't been utilized yet. So I kind of wanted to take those ideas you had for what your characters were going to be and kind of write a story that almost tailor fit them and y'all's play style. So, Cypher, maybe you or Canopsia, Juno can tell us. I'm going to get confused on which name to call you guys, but I should just use your guys' regular names. So, Juno, maybe you can tell us a little bit. Do you remember the questionnaire I sent everyone about the game before we got started? Do you want to tell us a little bit about that, or does anyone want to jump in there?
Sure, I can talk about the questionnaire.
Okay.
So the questionnaire really was just something of trying to get to know who it was that, you know, we were playing. There were also some other questions in there relating to the playstyle of the game. One of which I think was on the romance scale. This is something I distinctly remember because it was like on a scale of 1 to 10. Like, do you want to, you know, are you cool with having goblin babies? Are you not? Do you not know romance at all? What do you want? You know, are you guys going to be cool with that? And I distinctly ranking somewhere on the scale of like 7. I think I put a 7 down there. I was like, hey man, I'm always looking for love. I'm always looking for love. So I distinctly remember that question being on there. But there were other things that, you know, that we're asking about your preferred play style. How do you prefer to play your character? Are you a frontliner? Do you prefer to hang out in the back? Like how is the party order gonna keep, like, what's the scale? What's the stack? how's this pancake going to be stacked, you know? Um,
How's this burger stack up?
yeah.
Because we got the beef.
Yeah, we do got the beef. Big time.
Yeah,
I distinctly something else I also remember about the sheet was filling out the backstory part of it, and I remember sitting there like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what I should do, because in the other campaign, No Pancakes, Kanatsuya didn't really have a whole lot of like growth or character growth, just because I came into the campaign while it was already running. I kind of came in like halfway through with Starbucks and being like, hey, sorry I'm late. I mean, I just joined, but you know, I'm still happy to play because that's how desperate I was for a game. And I didn't really know what to do, because I had kind of just given him such like a cut and dry background in case the DM had decided to try and work it in somewhere in the story, which they didn't. So I was just kind of like, I don't have to use this. I can do something completely different. And then there was the idea of maybe he just doesn't know fucking anything. Maybe he just doesn't know anything about anything ever, even about himself. So I kicked that ball around for a little bit with some of the other members at the table, and they all agreed, like, yeah, I mean, he didn't really have a whole lot of growth, so if you want to just do something off the cuff and, you know, just completely start with a new slate, then do it. And that's kind of what I did. Same guy, but he also just doesn't really know anything about himself or what's going on around him or his companions.
Yeah, and see, that's so funny, because a couple of points about what you're saying is like, yes, that's, I didn't even think to mention the questionnaire was a lot about me understanding who your characters were, because of all the games I did come and sit in and watch with you guys. That was not one of them. I don't think I ever sat through a No Pancakes, or if I did,
No.
there wasn't a lot of anything actually going on that pertained to your characters.
I distinctly remember you joined the server.
Okay.
But you never came in. And to that, I respected.
Same.
Because truth be told, all four of us, before we had to go in there, would be sitting and hanging out somewhere else in a voice chat. And like the time would come and we would all just sit there and be like, I don't want to go in there. Who's going to be the sacrificial lamb? Who's going first? That is. And at that point, I remember sitting there and I just kept thinking if this is literally what we're doing, if we are all gathering and assembling and we're having too much fun hanging out over here, and then we're all dreading going over there, then we shouldn't play. I don't want to play in a game that makes us all feel like this, where we are dreading going over and sitting there for like, I don't know, sometimes 2 to 3 hours and just kind of have the story told at us and not really
involving
make room for anybody else. Yeah, not really making room for anyone else.
Yeah, and that's go ahead.
Like, it was weeks before like anything like was really done to leave. Because like we had grown so attached to these characters, and like we wanted to see their like stories fulfilled, and it was like devastating to like have someone almost sideline what we'd given them to like tell their own story.
Yeah, for sure. And again, I don't want to spend too much time talking about the campaign you guys did play in, No Pancakes, but I do want to mention just the fact that hearing you guys tell me about your characters and how much effort you'd put into the backstories, and then me giving you this questionnaire and getting back I mean, some of you guys gave me back like 2,000 or 3,000 words about your characters in a
I gave you a
questionnaire.
link to a Google Doc.
Yeah. Some of you guys gave me Google Docs that were pages, you know what I mean? Like 10, 15 pages about these characters. And to think that someone wasn't utilizing that in the story, that was a red flag to me of like, no, that's the wrong play style for you guys. And especially with Juno and Canopsia having a completely blank slate, that is like my favorite thing in the universe. Give me a character that has no backstory and I will weave a thread through you that will
because
blow your mind.
essentially he didn't have one, you know, like he didn't have one in the game that we were playing.
Yeah, there wasn't. It was almost like playing a game where the characters didn't matter. They were plug and play characters.
Yeah, and also I was just like, I was there to cast spells and also play secondary healer. And also I could take a hit. I won't talk about too much about what made me leave. And again, I don't want to talk about No Pancakes that much anyway.
Yeah.
But a lot of the stuff that, you know, that happened to Kay in the first episode also reflected back towards No Pancakes a little bit.
Yeah, there was definitely taking some inspiration from ways I felt your character was being held back and helping them find their footing a little bit better the way that I felt they should. Yeah, and with that, let's jump into recapping what is Pristine Dreams and talking a little bit about that, because I think that we've got a lot to cover and we've already been talking for a little bit now. So let's go ahead and jump right into that. And the impetus of the kind of last moment of No Pancakes that kind of cut the head of the dragon, to speak, was Canopsia being petrified. That your character was petrified by a basilisk. Hey, it happens. Yes. This has happened to everyone in D&D.
Oh, yes, of course.
But there was a moment where you came to a game and spent the entire game petrified, like a 4.5 hour session.
Yes. Do you mind if I talk about that a little bit?
I don't mind. No, because that is kind of important to why we got switched over.
Okay. Yes. That was the catalyst for me leaving the game, for leaving No Pancakes. Essentially, I had been given a what was it? A fortitude something among the Pathfinder saves where I had to essentially critical succeed. You know, with Pathfinder 2e, you get a lot of nutty modifiers. Like it can go up to like plus 20 for some of your skills. It can there's trained, skilled, master, and legendary or something like that. And essentially it was impossible for me to succeed, essentially.
Right, mathematically impossible.
Mathematically, it was impossible for me to succeed on that roll, essentially because of how high the DM had set the DC. I could not have won that fight. And it felt very directed at me, and it felt essentially like this is their way of saying, fuck you.
Well, this
is what you get for doing something cool in my game.
There's definitely an aspect that we're going to cover in other videos, hopefully maybe some tutorials that we'll put on D20 Dreamland that talk about that kind of scaling and how, I don't know the scenario, but even if that GM had been able to say, hey, all of that was directly out of the book, is that okay for you to do to a character? Like that's the real question, is like, do you take a character out of play for an entire session based that strictly on the rules without giving them like you have a dream sequence or
no, I had no interaction from the DM in that 4-hour time span at all. I distinctly remember halfway through I was like, I don't want to keep sitting here. So I went to go lay down with my headphones still on. I could still hear the session, but I wasn't needed again for another 2 hours. And at that point, I think I had fallen asleep just because I was waiting for so long and there was no attempt to bring me into the play at all. Even, and this is something that you could have tried to approach the DM to talk about. Any other person, would have. But this DM was essentially resistant to criticism and was not very receptive towards our ideas or criticism at all.
Right.
They were very against it. Go ahead, Dusk.
During this, we were fighting the basilisk, and Kay gets petrified, and it's just, for the DM, it was just boom, you're petrified. Anyways, moving on to the story. From my point of view, it felt like they completely discarded Juno. No checking in during the session, no checking in after the session. That just pulling a player from play when you're wanting a very story forward campaign is just not it, Chief.
Yeah, or if you feel like a player is somehow causing too many distractions or something like that, and you want to sideline them, this is absolutely not the right way to do it, in my opinion, right? So again,
absolutely.
I'll probably put together some tutorial video at some point that will address this exact situation in more detail. But suffice it to say that for an online player, this sucks, right? I'm going to check out. I'm going to go play a game. There's a million other better things I could be doing. But when this story was relayed to me as an in-person player, to think, what if I had driven 45 minutes to someone's house and sat there for 4.5 hours without being addressed and playing the game? With nowhere else to go, I can't leave. That would be unbearable. That would be so awful. And to me, as a GM who's run a number of games with weird things like that happening, to me, making this a challenge for the party of saying, hey, the party now has to carry the statue of the character. That's one thing, to burden the rest of the party and make it fun for them. But that's the kind of thing you do if that player who's petrified can't make it to a session. You make them petrified, and now everyone has to deal with it,
Yeah, if they can't play.
Yeah, but in the case that you want to still incorporate that, there are lots of kind of ways you can finagle that in. And I remember recapping that with you guys of saying someone has a telepathic connection. So you can't move, but you can scream inside someone else's head ad nauseum, distracting that player, or you can give your petrified person a dream sequence that they have to constantly keep coming back to and interacting with. Maybe the other players see visions of the petrified character in their dreams a few hours later. You'd have to incorporate these pretty frequently, at least once an hour or so, but you could certainly do that to keep your character engaged.
Just at least brief cutaways, at least for a few seconds, just hey, Canopsia, how are you doing? Bad.
Yes.
Yeah.
To completely ignore not only a character, but a player, definitely can feel, especially on the player side, very personal. You feel personally attacked as a player rather than something bad happened to your character. Right.
Correct. And I would like to just put it out here that I tried to give the DM the benefit of the doubt, and I genuinely did want to continue on with the game, if not for the DM, for the people I was playing with, because I had cared about the story that we were crafting. But it was clear to me that the DM did not care about me being involved in that story at all. They were not concerned about it in the slightest, or trying to find a way to incorporate, I don't know, a new player character into the storyline. And instead of just being, doing some sort of setup, it's just oh, they're here. They're here now. And it's just okay, that's cool. That takes me out of the immersion a little bit, but I can roll with this. I can work with this.
It would be easy enough to also say, hey, I know in an upcoming challenge, my players will be fighting a basilisk. There's a very good chance one of them gets petrified. I am going to make an NPC that the character who is petrified now gets to play. So there are several different ways to handle this scenario. And I just think
None of which were followed. None
Yeah,
of which were followed,
just
by the way.
completely ignoring a player was not, to me, the best way someone could have gone about it. And it seemed like, yeah, if there was ever a time to extricate you guys from one game into another, this event seemed like a great segue to me. And just in my hearing of that story and the recounting of it, aside from any personal feelings Juno may have had on it, to me, this seemed like an opportunity now to say that this petrification could be a moment in which Canopsia is transitioned from one world to another, because they are no longer part of the waking world. They are now petrified and have become part of a different world entirely, which is what we used to transition into Pristine Dreams. Also connecting the idea of Pristine Dreams in a more literal way of the party now finding themselves in a dream world. So let's go ahead and jump into Pristine Dreams, because I think we've covered that topic fairly well. Like I said, we'll talk more in a later kind of tutorial-esque type video about maybe some ideas of how to handle that situation better. But hopefully people listening at home who may find themselves in that situation can at least take some ideas for what we mentioned so far and see how much this like personally feels bad for Juno. Like they're still upset about this. This was months ago, and you can tell they're still upset.
I don't, again, I really don't try to take things like directed towards my character personally. I want to make this I want to stress that if you will do something mean or drastic or sudden to my character, I don't take that personally, because it's for the game.
Right. Okay. Because, yeah, again, I think we fully conveyed the idea that what happened felt like a personal attack to you. It probably was, but let's not speak on behalf of someone else, because there's always the possibility they're just a dipshit, and they didn't know that they were being completely fucking rude to you. And I don't know. I wasn't there. And it's never going to change how you feel about it. You know what I mean? Because you're always going to feel like you got shit on, because you were, but the reason behind it may never make you feel better or worse about it. You know what I mean?
No, so, you're right.
Yeah.
So let's just mush.
No worries, my friend. I didn't want to let you ramble for too long, but I wanted you to get those feelings out. You know what I mean? Because you're right.
Here's the thing:
that's
those
an
feelings are never going to
part
get out. They're just kind of cartwheeling around back there. I'll let it go at some point, but I'm still salty about it.
But to say that bad experience led into something great I think is a great way to say this is how we got onto Pristine Dreams. Like we're turning a bad experience into a really good one. And that's what playing D&D should be about. Is not only respecting characters and respecting players, but turning our collective storytelling into something better than the sum of our parts. And I'm hoping you all will agree that that's what happened in our first session of Pristine Dreams. So being petrified, this led Canopsia into having that moment, that feeling that I describe in the session, which you guys can go back and watch if you haven't seen it yet. Otherwise, major spoilers ahead for those few episodes. But Canopsia awakes as being petrified and their life feeling like it slips away. They instead awake inside of a tavern. And this tavern that they awaken is a lively, bustling place. And no sooner do they awaken there are they kind of bombarded by a tavern owner who is telling Canopsia, hey, you have to go serve, a table out here. Go out there and take an order for me. Don't just be sitting around here behind the bar. And to that, Canopsia has this moment of realizing, oh, I'm not actually a warrior. I was not fighting a basilisk. I just fell asleep for a second. And now I have woken up in my real life, which is me as a server, a waiter at this tavern. So how did you feel in that moment, Juno? How did that feel for Canopsia to wake up there?
Not real. I mean, everything that had just happened before had already felt very surreal. And then suddenly just being, cold water splash, you were in a tavern. It gave him chills. He didn't really understand what was going on at first, but he just kind of had to roll with it, because in a working setting where things are constantly moving and you're having to constantly be moving around and keeping the business going, like I said, they just kind of had to keep rolling with it, because there was no time to really stop and question, hey, what's going on? It's just like, I'm going to act like I know what I'm doing, as most people do, and then I'm going to see if I can figure out what the fuck is going on, as most people do.
So as this kind of transpires, I do what I kind of considered not a very favorable thing for a GM to do, but I split the party. I purposely made an intro scene for each character that would be dedicated to kind of just them, or just them joining the group, which... I never like to do kind of that one-on-one role play. I like to have the team dynamic always, but sometimes it's inevitable. Sometimes like this, if you're trying to tell a certain story element, you're trying to do a little reveal, it works best. So, this was my foray into that experience of saying, I'm going to single out Canopsia for about 10-15 minutes, and we are going to just examine their character and how they fit into this world, thereby sending Canopsia out to a table to meet people in this world. And do you remember, Canopsia, who the first table of people you met was?
The first... No, I do not.
Okay, we played a couple of sessions since we went back to record this one.
Yeah.
So don't
Sorry.
feel bad. But we're going to try to do these more right at the end of a session. So we're going back a little bit on this one. But the first table you ran up to had the hog folk in it.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it was the hog folk, but I wasn't sure if I had interacted with them very first. Sure.
No worries. So yeah, this ended up being the first table that you met, this group of hog folk who call you over and immediately tell you, in their gruff, disgusting voices, that they have heard that your tavern serves the most delicious treat in all the land. And
pancakes.
Yes, exactly.
Those pancakes.
The all day long breakfast pancakes.
And Canopsia is just like, what the fuck are you talking about? I mean, I guess, but I don't know what that is.
Yeah, when you go back...
Apparently bringing that back to the chef apparently also didn't know what that was, and nobody else really had an idea of what the pancakes were. So everyone was just kind of like throwing their hands up in the air and just being like, huh? Pancakes? I guess. I want to make it work, but I don't know what's going on. I guess.
So that was definitely kind of the nod, the last ditch effort of saying goodbye to our previous campaign and hello to Pristine Dreams. That would be a world that would take things a little bit more satirically, have a little bit more fun with the worlds that we were in, with a little bit of humor, saying that these hogmen apparently knew what pancakes were, but no one else in the world kind of really had any idea, but they were going to make their best effort to make something they would enjoy, which to me was a bit of a metaphor of what the Pristine Dreams was actually going to be for you guys. That maybe it wasn't the sweet and delicious treat you guys craved, but it would be my best effort in bringing that vision to life. So a little bit of fun there. But on the topic of the tavern, it was shortly after that, after Canopsia was having a good time kind of serving these hog folk and watching their kind of goofy nature, that Bran makes an appearance, kind of kicking in the front double doors there with a deer on their back. And they come into the room as though they are a noble hunter and that they have killed a deer and they're going to sell it to this tavern for money. And as Bran's character approaches, they lock eyes with this server Canopsia. And in that moment, seeing this familiar face, they come to the realization that they don't quite remember what they're doing or why they're here. Do you remember what that was like, Dusk?
Hey, I remember just like the pit of like anxiety and just like anticipation up until that moment, and just being like, oh, it's my boy. It's the beef. And just like trying to like get into the mind space of like, all right, this is an interesting place that I found myself. And just like having like the familiar like sensation of like, all right, haunted a deer. That's what we're doing. That's what we're doing.
Yeah, and also
it is absolutely the thing of like pretending everything is fine when you know nothing.
yeah, the Sammy Jenkins thing, that's from that movie Memento, where if you don't remember something, you feign that you do because you don't want to look like the idiot, right? So you just pretend that you remember something when you don't,
Yeah.
But so Bran now shows up with this idea that they don't really remember who they are or what they're doing here. And now has to still kind of go through with this idea. They do have an understanding of like, I'm supposed to be selling this deer. And I know there's a moment where you kind of propose this to Canopsia, who tells you like, yes, you have to take this into the back room and, dress the deer back there with the chefs and stuff. And then we'll figure this out. At which point, I think you biffed a roll, right? Like
I did.
okay. I want to say a one was involved, but I don't remember
it was a
exactly.
Back-to-back 1 to a 20.
Yes, that's right. So you end up knocking the, you take the stag and basically like run the antlers across the table where some workers are sitting at, and spilling the drinks in the lap of one of the workers, who stands up and kind of, I describe them being angry, that they've got this mead spilled in their lap, and they stand up furious, only to lock eyes with Bran and suddenly kind of lose their sense of self, forget kind of who they are. And we reveal that this is in fact Rinveri. So E, what was that moment like for you, having a soaking wet crotch and your first moment in game?
It kind of felt like having something spilled on me in person, because I'm sitting here waiting like, oh, I wonder how Rinveri is going to be. Oh shit. Okay. What the hell? Yeah, it was like I shared that moment of shock with Rinveri, and I also like imagining the mental picture of this fetchling guy being like, "Hey, what the fuck, buddy?" And then like, just staring, and like, it's fine, don't worry about it, because Rinveri is not a very belligerent person. So just imagining that abrupt like personality switch seems funny, yet also really like kind of freaky in a way.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Anyone sitting with you would have noticed that very dramatic change. And again, kind of taking that cue from the fact that the questionnaire you sent me referred to Rinveri as a very sovereign character. They were someone who's very devout in their service to the sun god. And with that, kind of putting you in that situation.
Yeah.
That
was very interesting. It was, I can see the choice there, and I like it a lot.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. But yeah, that kind of goes in turn with everyone, as Canopsia being, kind of a frontline fighter, noble warrior, and relegating them to lowly server and getting barked at that they're not doing enough, when they're literally the one putting their ass on the line every time, to Bran coming in, who has this respect and compassion for nature as a ranger, just coming in like, yep, just selling you some meat because I don't give a shit about this animal, was kind of trying to take what was the antithesis of what your personality would be and kind of force you into that role a little bit, or to make you say like, what the fuck am I doing? Like, this is definitely not me. This is definitely not my character.
I really liked that, putting in these like jarring situations to wake up for our characters.
Thank you. And if a viewer out there has seen the episode, it kind of goes through a little bit of describing the scene, and then bang, oh, this happens to be you, by the way.
Yes.
So there's a bit of a shock to each of the characters. I think Canopsy is the only one that got off light because the petrification was like leading into that, but still the revelation of who what their character was doing now, I think, at least I hope, was very different than what they imagined the opening of this game would be.
Yeah.
So
yeah, absolutely.
from there, I remember this, the natural 20 that Dust spoke of comes about in you now have to take the deer to the back room, take it off Rinvery's table. I think you're trying to clean them up or something, and you roll like a bomb natural 20 that makes you do like a spinneroonie clean,
You did like this like magician's like table pull or something, or tablecloth pull, and you fold into a swan or something and handed it to Rinvery, who was very impressed.
Yeah, so it was a good like you got your mojo back like really quick after kind of biffing it.
So funny going from a 1 to a 20.
Oh yeah, it's so fucking just it's also like funny that you like chose that like he'd be carrying a deer, because like he has like a big deer association.
Oh yeah.
Very timid, but like very stoic and strong looking, but also very like timid.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so you think there was a little unintended symbolism between the way Brand carries themselves, their demeanor, and the a deer itself, almost like this was you hunting yourself in a sense.
Possibly. Oh.
Yeah.
So sometimes that's just the way the story plays out. It's got levels upon levels that you don't even intend. But for the most part, this was definitely a good way to introduce our first three characters, get them together in our first scene. And there was some conversation between Canopsia and Bran that led to, hey, let's take this deer into the back room. And I should have known. I had seen them play diner scenes, and I let Juno and Dusk take the deer into the back room, begin talking to the chefs, talking about what food they were going to make with it, everything like this. And this slowly became like a 15-minute ordeal in the back room, which it was as a faux pas on my part as a DM, because I had completely left Cypher out of the story so far. So having kind of a rapid fire introduction of the first three characters and then a very long wait for poor Cypher to get in was a misstep on my part, but did build anticipation for their eventual emergence when the party members had returned back into the main hall, only to find that the double doors would get smashed open by a hard charging badass Ifrit with a head full of fiery hair, led by a group of like over the top frat boy jockish level Ifrit warriors with them. So what was that like for you, Cypher?
Oh, it was great. For her to be like this it girl, so much like so much power there. It felt really like fun. So when she finally appeared, I was, I was just kind of proud. I was proud of my girl.
I know in that same scene of your entrance, I remember describing that you took a blade and threw it against the wall. And I meant to say your shard dagger, and I said something else. I can't remember what now, but if you've seen the episode, you know I misspoke, said something like it was a katana or something crazy.
You took your butter knife.
Yeah, it was something totally not right, and you threw it in the wall.
Scimitar, I think?
I think I did say a scimitar, yes. Because I was at the time, I was also playing in another game that was a desert campaign. So you're right.
Right.
Instead of saying a shard, I said you threw a scimitar into the wall.
Oh yeah, I got the wires crossed.
Yes, yeah. So that was supposed to be a clue that your guys is like what would eventually become your totems were in the world. So completely missed that and said it wrong. Instead of your shard dagger hitting the wall, a random ass scimitar that no one cared about hit the wall, and you guys never took that plot hook because it was nowhere. So that was my fault on that one. And of course, I don't even realize I said the wrong thing till I'm like editing the recording later. And I'm like, oh, that's why they never took that hook.
Oh, you're like, these fucking guys. Why are they not taking my hooks? Jeez. Oh.
I know.
Okay.
I'm like, look at the dagger. Get the dagger. And I'm like, oh, I never even mentioned the dagger. So
what dagger?
But that's the thing of like, you got to roll with it, both
yeah, exactly.
as players and DMs, and setting up the campaign ahead of time. I knew in my head there was always a chance that you guys wouldn't go for the totems in the first kind of dream state that you're in, because that's eventually what this all kind of boils down to, is you have found yourselves captured in a dream state. And we'll get to more on that towards the recap at the end. But at this point, I recall that Bran goes into is trying to get into another room, something about making stew or something in the other room, and you're heading that
check with the chefs to see if they needed meat.
Yeah, that's right. And I think they were the ones making the pancake batter, and they're like, why would we put meat in here or something? I don't remember. But as you're leaving,
you got it.
Yeah. Okay. As you're leaving, I do recall that you have that run in with the hog folk there. And I'm going to throw up our battle map of the area so that our party can see that.
The room I was going to was where they were making the pancake batter.
Yes. That's right. And it had the cauldron. Carl was the cauldron in there. But of course we didn't notice that early on, which was the thought that those things that they wouldn't get noticed early on. But as you came back into the main hall, you did run into the hog folk, and you had a bit of a bromance there. Do you want to tell us a bit about that?
Hyped with the boys.
So what did that moment feel like to you, Dusk?
Just, I wasn't expecting it, but it was it was a really fun and funny moment for me of just like picturing Bran just going to frat boy mode.
Did you have any at first, when that first started off, did you have any inkling of where that was kind of going? Because this was a moment kind of built around one important part of the questionnaire that was more about your fears, your character's fears and apprehensions. And one of the things I remember you had put in there was a fear of becoming what you sought to destroy,
Exactly.
And that you're trained as this monster hunter, but do you spend so much time among them that you won't realize when you become a monster? And
it immediately clicked once you mentioned you look down and you are becoming like them.
Yeah.
So I'm I see you. I see you, Chavez.
So that was the whole thing of you kind of bumped into them, and you had the opportunity to be aggressive and defend yourself against them, but instead decided to say, I'm going to be a little more diplomatic, kind of laugh along with them. And in a sense, showing you the picture of the hog folk was definitely a little bit of bait to be like, look at how massive these dudes are, don't mess with them. But in essence, you took that bait and I'm going to take the more diplomatic route. There's 10 of these guys in here. There's just me. But that being I'm going to join in their reveille, in their laughter was again, you just ignoring what in essence was right, which would have been to stand up for yourself and tell them, hey, you're being rude. You need to shut up. And instead say, I'm going to play the monster. And that was the folly, is don't do that. So it's like the dream world is trying to get you to fall for your poor instincts, you know, and fall into that trap.
Yeah.
As much as me, the GM, wanted you to fall for it too. So so it worked out really good. At that same time, the other kind of big moment in the room happening was that Canopsia was given orders to take a prepared meal over to table 9, the infamous table 9. Canopsia, you want to tell us a bit about table 9?
Yeah, I like table 9. It's a cool table. There's a cool guy sitting at that table.
Who was that sitting
That's
at
it.
that table?
That's
It's
it.
just some guy. Yeah, it's
Just
fine.
some guy.
Whatever.
You
Not a
know,
big deal.
yeah,
It's a man,
yeah, he's
yeah.
not really. Yeah, he's not really a big deal or anything like that. He's just
No.
like, you know, he's.
He's alright.
He just, you know, he ordered a drink. And apparently, when Kay goes to like put it down, this man like grabs Kay and is like, "The shit's watered down. Get me a real drink, or I'm gonna kick your ass." And Canopsia is just like, "Yeah, man, whatever you want." Just like sweating a little bit because this hot old man is just like suddenly pulled him down, and he's just like, "Okay, whatever you want, man. Just leave me alone."
Well,
Juno was really into it. Kay was not.
I do remember, Juno, at first, like the barkeep openly waters down that drink in front of Canopsia. And
Yes.
I meant to do that as a very like, oh, this guy's being a jerk. And you surprised me by saying like, oh, I bet that dude's like had too many drinks and is drunk, so we're watering down his food. So I thought, oh, that's really that. I hadn't thought of that. So that was a cool thought that you had. And I kind of was like, I'm going to let you kind of ride that idea out and not realize that this guy is doing that. To which point, when you did go back to the bartender and tell him, hey, this drink is watered down, like get him a real one. I remember he ends up using what I unintentionally didn't realize was like a racial slur, you know?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And Kay, both Kay and I were like, huh? What? Because like I remember being like taken aback, like, what? Huh?
So I just want to take a second to add a little bit more detail here so people don't get the wrong idea. So what happened was when I used to play D&D 3.5 back in the day, we ran through a lot of Ravenloft modules and the campaign setting. And the people I played with at the time would refer to the Vistani and describe them using what is a slur towards Romani people. And I didn't know that. I didn't realize that that's kind of where that came from. So when Juno and Canopsia made mention of it in the moment in the game while we were playing, I kind of rolled with it as a GM. It did help describe like the character was a bad guy. But it immediately alerted me to like, oh, okay, like do not use that term again. And I didn't throughout the rest of the adventure, and I won't in the future because now I know it's a pejorative term. So as a GM, you should be on the lookout for that. And the reason I included it and wanted to bring it up here was simply that as like a learning tool of like, not only in the original recording can you see that I kind of like make like a joke out of asking like, is this actually pejorative, you know? And I mentioned something along the lines of like, hey, it's 2023, like we can't be talking like that. And then when Juno confirmed, yes, that's accurate, I was like, oh, okay, then they're serious that this is a derogatory term. And it wasn't some character aspect that I didn't understand, but instead was a real life aspect that I didn't understand. But either way was something I shouldn't continue to do. And I feel like I read that correctly. So hopefully that's a good example for people out there. If you do find yourself in that situation. And also too, as a player, for Juno to be able to recognize, hey, the GM has made a mistake there, but they are correcting it and we can still play the game and have fun, I think is also kudos to Juno for being understanding of my misinterpretation of the description.
Yes. Yes. Yes, correct. Yeah, but I'm glad that we have talked about that.
Yeah.
Because I obviously don't want anyone in the audience. We don't want to be fucking racist. We don't want to be fucking weird or bad or have fantasy racism in my game. No fantasy racism allowed. Not in my turf. It's like, so when he dropped that slur, I was just like, okay, are we gonna brawl? Am I gonna brawl you right now?
Yeah, you're
Is
like, I
that
gotta
what I'm
mess
gonna
this
do?
dude up. And I'm like, no,
Am
that's definitely
yeah.
me. Just not realizing that wasn't a cool
Yeah,
thing to
no,
say.
yeah, no, no. Because like there was a definite moment where Kay was like, "Do I punch him? Do I punch him?" No, it's a moment of ignorance, and which is why we talk about it.
So, but this did lead to the next part
Yes.
of the story, which is where the kind of first aspect of it comes to a close, in which you, during that exchange, you realize that Nyx, her Ifrit bros are clashing with the hog folk. And all of a sudden they start getting pretty rowdy, and it looks like they might actually throw hands. At which point, I know, Nyx, you jumped in to intervene to make sure a fight would not break out. What were kind of your thoughts in that moment?
She's tough. She's tough, and she wants to, be part of, I don't want to say like the control of situations, but, just be vigilant, I guess.
Well, I think it was pretty clear that you were like the commander of these people. So
yeah,
it was like your guys acting a fool,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I think it's safe to assume you felt some responsibility towards, I better not let them get out of hand.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what she was doing for sure.
Yeah. So in that sense, as that kind of transpired, I'm sure you recall, like, you try to diffuse the situation with the hog folk, but you did it very aggressively, because that's Nyx's character, right?
That's how she do.
Yeah, a bit of a badass, a bit of an ass kicker. And you bowed up to the hog folk, and that didn't really super work out well for Nyx, who kind of aggressively tells the guy to, like, "Oh, you said, what's your problem, man?"
Right. Yeah.
And I remember he was like, "You're my problem." And then he stabbed you. Yeah. So he stabs you in the gut, which was very similar to the way that Hal had been killed, stabbed in the gut, sort of the same way. And you start to realize in that moment that you're like, okay, this is bad. Like, this reminds me a little bit of what happened before. But how did Cypher feel about that? Like, ending up in that same scenario that you had kind of lost your previous character to? Was that shocking in any way, or?
Definitely. Shocking is a way you could put it, or, just generally being taken aback, and I thought to myself, oh man, this is definitely like the parallel and the hook, and I need to think this through and figure out, how, this is going to affect Nyx, and, as well as, how to wrap my brain around what exactly is happening in this story now. So yeah, it was shocking. And it felt like, it felt sad, because what happened to Howell was sad. And, yeah, so it did, open up old wounds.
So, yeah, see, that's now I feel bad, right? Because there's definitely a theme that's going to run throughout that whole first session of Nyx trying to separate their identity from Hal, and trying to say we're not the same person, but more importantly, to say we don't both have the same fate. which was kind of the big thing that Cypher sent to me in Nyx's backstory questionnaire about their biggest fear, their fear of being unable to avoid the fate of their predecessor, that they knew and understood that they were a reincarnation of this previous person, shared some of their memories, but really knew that this is a fate I wish to avoid. But in essence, there's a lot of Hal didn't do anything wrong, got kind of double crossed by somebody and stabbed out of nowhere. It was an unavoidable sort of situation. So there's that lesson there of like, there is nothing you can do about it. You just have to be your own person. So there was a big push for me to try to impart that lesson onto the character of Nyx. But this one was a twofer for me. I was excited about this one because now we had Renveri, who one of their biggest fears being the healer of the party, the holy person of the party, seeing a party member go down the way that Hal did and not being able to save them. But to reincarnate them anew is nice, but they felt this burden of like, maybe I have let down Hal. I wasn't there for them. I wasn't able to save them. Am I really good enough? Am I doing enough? So this became the exact same scenario that could either be a redemption for Renveri or a confirmation of their inability to protect their teammates. So Endo, how did you feel in that moment as Renveri saw that happen to Nyx?
I felt all right. I wasn't stressed or worried or anything.
You're like, I was like, whatever.
It was like, whatever. History repeats itself. It's fine. No, I felt so much panic.
Circle of life.
It's just a circle of life, baby. It felt awful. And like, yeah, what I wrote in Renveri's questionnaire. And like, he's very hung up over letting Hal die. And even though he succeeded in the resurrection, or not resurrection, the reincarnation ritual. Yeah. Like, he still feels like he didn't do enough. And so seeing Nyx dying before him, like, yeah, really, he didn't realize in a moment, but it was bringing back that feeling of losing Hal. And, I remember he reaches for a holy symbol in that moment that he didn't have.
Yes.
and just sealing that helplessness. Love it.
Yeah, in the dream state as a minor, you didn't have access to a holy symbol anymore.
Nope. None of that stuff. So like, he was desperate, like didn't know what to do for help. And I think you had me roll, and Canopsia gave advice for what to do.
Yeah, Canopsia, who was desperately trying to get over to help the situation as well, but was slowly, I think, either sinking into the ground or becoming stone, or a mix of both. Because I know this was...
He was sinking into the ground. Like, the world around him was literally swallowing him up.
Yeah, but you were able to call out. You had realized, you need to give Nyx some water, like give them some water. And I think that was the advice they gave Renveri. And how did Renveri act? What'd they do?
Like, got it, water.
And then proceeded to waterboard Nyx.
Yeah. Grab that water and like, okay, water's the answer. Let's give a lot of water. If we apply a lot of water to the situation, it'll wash it all away. Let's pour water on the Ifrit, on the bleeding Ifrit.
Yeah, let's do that. I wanted to get into that because as I was like re-listening to the episodes, I don't think there, in the transition, there wasn't a lot of time for Kay to be like, oh my god, what have I done? But I think there was definitely that sensation of, oh my god, what have I done? Because it was, watching that watching that light go out, it does stuff to you and it makes you feel really bad. And he feels really bad, so yeah, whatever, man. Renveri
and Canopsia shaking hands. the two
Feels
holy
bad,
people, like,
man.
yeah,
Yeah,
we
it
did
feels
bad
bad.
together.
Now, in the meantime, Bran steps up to attack the hog folk that were aggressive towards Nyx, at which point they found that their weapon had become kind of noodly and useless. Also kind of leaning into the secondary idea that Bran, for all of their monster hunting knowledge, would not be able to save enough people or feel that they did enough with what they had learned. So this was kind of playing a factor into that, where everyone now is trying to save Nyx in their own way and kind of not doing a great job. So Cypher, what were your thoughts in that moment, seeing everyone kind of fail around you to try to help you?
There was just, I mean, I think we've all mentioned helplessness. So there was just like this helplessness that I felt. Because I'm not really sure, like, or I wasn't at the time, how, how much of a fight she could really put up, with, her, being with having been stabbed. And then, there was just, I just experienced like a paralysis of creativity here. I was just like, well, this is happening.
Literally, well, guess I'll die.
Exactly.
Classic, yeah. But I think there's definitely it's worth noting too the fact that, like, in a sense, I play the game in I was playing this first session especially kind of outside the rules of any system. This had become something a la Choose Your Own Adventure more than a strict Pathfinder 2E, D&D 5e session, because you guys were taking Pathfinder 2E characters. I hadn't played a lot of Pathfinder 2E. I wasn't really sure how to adapt that. So this was going kind of based on instinct and storytelling and being a bit of a prototype. Like, would we all enjoy playing together? Would I enjoy playing online? So that's in that prototyping, this leaves you with a lot of, I don't have a super ton of game mechanic options. I can't ask for a saving throw. I can't say, well, I know my action says I can do this. And anyone who watched the actual session will probably get that feeling, that they'll understand that that's what we were going for. We're collectively telling a story rather than playing a game to an extent, or somewhere in between. But so I just want to ask the most direct question I can. Did you think I was going to kill Nyx in that moment?
No, I really didn't. And the reason is because I didn't believe that you would. I didn't believe that you would do that to me.
You're like, I'd kick your ass IRL, man.
Yeah, like I was just kind of like, no, that's not what's happening.
Okay, so it was still, you felt that this was the story and were invested in the story more than having concern for a ruthless DM that was now just going to make your worst fears come true.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's good to know for me, because I don't ever really want to put people under that pressure, even though.
Yeah.
Go ahead. Yeah.
I was saying, also, like, it was a shitty moment, but definitely wasn't worried about that either, because it just wouldn't make sense narratively for you to do that. So it was a lot of, just going along with the story and trying to move it along.
Yeah, I think.
And just having trust with that.
Well, thank you. Yeah, and I think building the scene to illustrate y'all's helplessness rather than any peril that Nyx was actually in.
Yeah.
It wasn't like all the hog folk are tearing her to pieces or something like that, or stabbing her over and over. It was,
Sorry, yeah, and it just, experiencing that helplessness it was worse. I mean, there are worse things than death, and just feeling that unified sense of, shit, we can't do anything as horrible thing is happening. Like, it was bad, but like in a fun way for us playing.
Well, good. I'm glad it was still in a fun way. Yeah.
Yeah. Enjoyed it thoroughly.
We'd all three seen how, or Nyx die once. Seeing her almost die again, really, really great introduction to the campaign.
Mhm.
So again, trying to tie those similar threads from your previous story into this story to me were important to say we're not completely losing what you guys had before, instead building upon it. So kind of using this as a foundation of this is the experiences that you guys had. These are the way that you guys felt, right? This also kind of becomes a metaphor for what we're doing. And I think that's most evident in like the wrap up of this initial first scene where, Devlin approaches you guys and, kneels before Nyx where Rinvari is trying to help them, reaches out and takes Rinvari by the hand and tells you, hey, that's it. There's nothing more you can do for them. They're gone. Like there's only one thing you can do, and that's wake up, And so that again, symbolizing that the adventure you were playing was a bit of a dream, and you're still struggling to hold on to it in this first part of Pristine Dreams. And to say, Devlin to show up and say, hey, you need to let go of that past because you're in for some different shit now.